When I started restoring these buildings, I had to go with what I knew. And uh, one thing that I did in the past was I built airplanes and kayaks. So I knew the West System epoxy system because of that. And this is kind of what I use to repair some of these window frames. The reason I like it is it's very structural. And you mix it with flocked cotton fiber, which is a filler. It comes with a pump system, brush it on. I'm going to go through some steps on how to use the West System epoxy for restoring these old windows. And I know there's a lot of folks out there who do window restoration and old building restoration that are either A, their eyebrows are going up like, oh, that's a good idea, or they may be looking at that saying, boy, this guy's crazy. But each to their own. This is what I use to bring these back to a structural state where they're strong, and I think they're going to last through the years. A lot of folks will actually use Bondo for fillers, but one thing about Bondo is it's not structural. It's basically a filler. And what you find with the West System epoxy is it'll soak into the wood fibers, and it'll actually create a structural component as you go forward. And then it's sandable, so you can sand it to whatever shape you need in the end. So follow the process. Don't naysay it yet. It actually works for me. It may not be right for you, but this is what I use. As I take each window apart, I try to document all of the dimensions on a piece of paper so they're not lost. One of the trickiest things to do is to get these pieces of glass out without breaking them, because over the years people have been going through these things and resealing them with everything under the sun, and oftentimes it's tough to get them apart without breaking the glass. So that's my challenge this morning. From the time I take the window out of the building until it's put back in, I worry about breaking the glass. At this point, I have success, but we'll see how things go, because you never know. It's important to get these little pieces out that secure the joint. And then you can gently tap the joints apart. You need to get everything apart in order to apply the adhesive properly. Any loose joint there is, it's very important to get those all apart so you can get everything repaired. It's always important to clean out the tracks to make sure all the window parts and pieces are out, and also these little glazing points need to be all removed. Here's the corner that we're going to do some repairs on. This is the second pane for the center window, and as you can see, it has its own challenges. It's been screwed together, and who knows what else they did to keep this thing together over the years. Looks like we have some screws, various parts. We're going to take all those out, and I'm going to show you a method that I use to make these things as solid as a rock. I believe this one's reusable. Okay, the window has essentially been taken apart now. We have all the pieces kind of lined up where they go. Okay, for this step in the process, you're going to need the Epoxy Resin, which is West System 105. I like to use the slow hardener, which is 206. If you use 205, it will harden a little faster, but I like a lot of working time. I don't mind letting it sit overnight, but it's up to you. If you want to, go fast acting and so forth, it's good to use the 206. Fast acting rather, 205, slow acting 206. This is flocked cotton fiber. This is basically cotton fibers that's been cut up real fine. And what that ends up being is a structural member in the resin. And it gives the resin tensile strength so it won't pull apart. And it also is a thickening agent, so you can actually thicken things up. You'll see more of that later. You need a chip brush, just a cheap brush that's going to be thrown away because there's no way to get it out of a brush. Once this stuff is mixed and it goes off, that brush will harden. You need a mixing stick and a mason jar. Some old jar that you have will work, or little pan will work as well. So if you buy the West System, you can buy also the pumps. Okay, this is a 5-to-1 ratio, and the pumps will actually measure it for you, so it's a lot easier. So we're going to go, you just have to count your pumps. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I'm just going to go 6 pumps to get some material going. Then we switch over to the 206 hardener. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Now you take this and just start to stir it up. And it's just like maple syrup at this point. You mix it for a good minute. I usually don't get real crazy about it, but you want to get everything mixed together. Now what I'm going to try to do is take the epoxy and just brush it all over the surfaces that are going to be joined. And what that does is it begins soaking into the wood. So if you have wood that's compromised and rotting, that sort of thing. This will just bind those wood fibers together really nicely. As it soaks in, the wood fibers end up being a bit of a bonding agent in themselves. Now, if I were to leave the epoxy in its current state, it would just run out of the joint as we put this together. So the next step is going to be really important. I just wanted to show you for a second this joint that's highly compromised. There's really no shape to it anymore. The joint is essentially gone. But by brushing the epoxy into the joint, and letting the wood soak up that epoxy, we have really started to create a situation where that wood is going to become strong. I should have had rubber gloves on from the start, but I guess I was too excited to get started with the video. But anyhow, you put a little bit of flocked cotton fiber in the mix, and then you just start to stir. You can see it's starting to thicken up the epoxy. Okay, now the West system is really starting to shine in its capabilities, so you can adjust the viscosity of this to anything you want, from maple syrup all the way up to well beyond peanut butter. It just depends on how much flocked cotton fiber you add. So at this point, it's kind of running off the end of the mixing stick, and that's just perfect for these joints that are a little bit tighter. So these joints that are a little tighter, I can pack some of this into those joints, put them together, and they'll be pretty secure with that, and the epoxy is not going to run out. Now, when it comes to this joint that needs more substance, it's going to need more of a just a large amount of epoxy compound. And what I'll do is I'll add more flocked cotton fiber to the mix and bring up the viscosity to the point where it's not going to run out of that joint. And then I can shape it. I can put the joint to whatever shape I want as I put it together. As you can see, I wet out the joint completely. And once it goes into that slot there, it will be solid as a rock once it's cured, filling every void. And then that epoxy that I brushed in has already soaked into the wood, so the glue joints, the epoxy joint kind of penetrates into the wood pretty darn deep, and it ends up real solid. Plenty of squeeze out. And I'll hit that with the mallet a little bit, bring that joint a little tighter, and off we go. As you can see, the joint is filled up beautifully. It's oozing out. We can wipe off a little excess. That's a nicely packed joint that will never come apart once that epoxy goes off. Okay, I have all three of the other joints glued or epoxied. They're not complete. I'm going to do a little filling in those holes and so forth. All those pins that I pulled out, all these little guys here, are going to not be used. The epoxy is going to hold everything in place. I'll fill those pinholes with some epoxy resin and then slick it over. Now this is the problem corner. So once you have your other three, or once I have these other three secured, I'm going to make sure this dimension is correct. I'll make sure this dimension is correct. Make sure everything's square. And then I'm going to pack that full of thickened epoxy resin to bring that into a state where it looks just like it used to. Now you couldn't use this method if you were painting these, but I'm sorry, you couldn't use this if you were just staining and stripping these window sashes. These are all going to be painted, and you won't see any of this repair once things are complete. Joint. Now what I'll do is I'll pack it in just a little bit oversized. As you can see, the epoxy is a little bit larger than what it's going to end up being, but this sands down beautifully. Here's all the windows ready for assembly. I cut them all on my little table saw and got the mortise and tenon set up here. These are the two windows on the right, and here's two windows on the left of that bay window. And then here's the one out of the two larger center windows that needed to be replaced. The other one is the one that I epoxied. This is a quick jig I made up for my table saw. It basically holds the wood in the upright position 90 degrees to the blade. So you put it on the rip fence there. It slides back and forth on the rip fence. And this guy here just kind of holds the board at a 90-degree angle. It allows it to be held in place. And then that mortise and tenon can be cut for all the pieces. The side of the window that faces indoors is going to have a nice kind of decorative edge that I did with my router. And then on the flip side is the notch that the glass will go in. Now, what'll happen is I'll chisel out the corners. Make sure you have a sharp chisel to do that with, but these corners will be squared off so the glass sets nicely into the front side of the window. Okay, I'm done building all the windows. Here we have the two sets of windows for the sides of the bay window. Here we have the one that we restored and the other that we built to complete the center double hung portion of the bay window. So next step is to prime them. So I just wanted to show you, that here's the one that I built, and then here's the pane that I restored. And the epoxy joint in the corner is pretty much, I think this is the one that got the most repair material, but it is solid as a rock, and it's primed now, and pretty soon we'll be able to stick a piece of gloss in there and put it to use. As we do the priming, I just wanted to show you these little guys. They're pretty handy. You can put them on the table and basically prop up your workpiece. As you coat one side, you flip it over almost immediately onto these points, and you can continue to prime the opposite side afterwards. So you can move along pretty quickly. Okay, I hope you enjoyed that video. It was basically outlining how I restore these old windows. Now keep in mind, the two outer windows for that bay window are not going to be fully functional. They're going to be cocked in place and just aesthetically correct. The center window I'm restoring to the point where I'm going to put the window weights in and actually use that for functional use in the building. But keep in mind, these methods are not standard. The West system epoxy is not something many people use. It's just what I'm familiar with, and it works pretty well for me. Building the windows out of 2x4s that I purchased from Lowe's. These are just framing studs. They're not beautiful pieces of wood, but they're very functional and very strong, and they'll last just like anything else. So it's everything that I do is it's a balance between what does it cost and how fast can I do it and how fast can I get this place up and running, and with the idea of trying to make it as beautiful as we can in the process. These are old buildings that would otherwise be torn down, so I think it's an acceptable level of restoration to make the windows as I have done for my purposes, because eventually this apartment is going to be rented out and I'll have tenants. Not that they should have any less than anybody else, but I think we can make a beautiful place for somebody to live. So if you liked what you saw and you want to see more of the same type of video, be sure to like and subscribe, and we can continue to bring these videos to you. And well, actually, I'm going to keep bringing the videos whether or not you like and subscribe. I just want to get the information out there so other people can do the same thing that I've done with these buildings.